All of you are fired. Lauren Carter's voice cut through the air like a blade, slicing the thick silence that hung inside the 42nd floor boardroom of Sky Vista Airlines. No one breathed. No one moved. Only the sound of rain tapping softly against the glass proved that time was still moving. In front of her sat the most powerful faces of the prestigious airline CEO Harold Grant, the head of human resources, the director of customer service, and the entire executive team, frozen in disbelief. 3 hours earlier, they had been on a flight together, treating her like a troublesome passenger. Now they were staring at the same woman standing in the very seat of power they thought would always belong to them. Lauren stood tall, not angry, not shouting, just calm, steady, and terrifyingly composed. "You can't be serious." A man's trembling voice broke the silence. Harold Grant, who had been CEO of Sky Vista for 7 years, forced a brittle smile that cracked like shattered glass. "You don't have the authority to do this." Lauren slowly placed a stack of folders on the glass table, the sound sharp as a knife scraping stone. "You're right," she said evenly. "I wouldn't have the authority if I were just a passenger." She paused, locking eyes with him, her voice dropping lower. "But I own 58% of Sky Vista Airlines." The room erupted into chaos, a storm of whispers, scraping chairs and broken breaths. One man shot to his feet, trembling as he clutched his phone. Another opened his mouth to speak, but only gasped like a fish out of water. Lauren remained still composed, as if she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. She looked at each of them, the very people who had ordered her off her own airline's first-class seat. Cheryl Adams, the chief flight attendant, who had told her she would be more comfortable sitting with people like herself. Kyle Rogers, who smirked as he forced her to move, saying, "The company reserves the right to reassign seats." And Gregory Barnes, the arrogant VIP passenger, who took her seat and sneered, "Some people just don't understand how the world works." Now the three of them sat at the far end of the table, pale and speechless, unable to meet her gaze. Lauren drew a steady breath. Her voice was warm, yet solid as steel. 3 hours ago, I was forced out of my first-class seat on the very airline I control. None of you knew because it never crossed your minds that a black woman could stand in this position. She let the words sink in, heavy and slow. But I'm here today, not for revenge, but to correct a system that's forgotten what the word respect means. At the end of the table, Harold tapped his fingers on the glass, trying to regain control. "You don't understand," he stammered. "You're talking about minor employee issues. Nothing that justifies." Lauren cut in sharply, her tone like thunder. "Minor A passenger being forced from her seat because of her skin color is minor. Years of buried discrimination, reports are minor. Or the hush money you paid to silence employees who dared to speak up, is that minor too?" Outside thunder rolled. Inside no one dared to answer. Lauren turned toward the window where dark clouds gathered over Dallas, then looked back, her voice calm again. But every word weighed like lead. "No, this isn't outrage. This is a wake-up call." A full minute of silence followed. Then she turned toward Andre Lewis, who had just entered, still wearing his flight attendant uniform, but standing tall with newfound confidence. "Mr. Lewis," she said, "starting today you'll serve as Senior Director of Customer Experience." Andre froze, eyes wide, before standing. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Lauren replied softly. "Just do what's right. I'll handle the rest." Her gaze swept the room once more. Those who once sat at the top of power now bowed their heads. No one dared speak. She knew this silence wasn't born of fear. It was shame. Lauren walked out of the boardroom. The rain struck harder against the glass. Lightning tore across the sky, a declaration that an era had ended. In the long, carpeted hallway, her footsteps echoed like the measured beat of a victory drum, though there was no triumph in her eyes, only the gravity of responsibility. She stopped before the large window, looking down at the rain-soaked streets of Dallas below. Cars crawled through the storm small and hurried, a perfect reflection of the world itself, everyone running, everyone chasing, afraid of being left behind. Lauren closed her eyes for a brief moment. In the darkness, she could still hear the mocking laughter on the plane, the suspicious look from security, the smug voice of the man who had stolen her seat. Each memory returned vividly, not to reopen old wounds, but to remind her why she had to rise. When she opened her eyes again, she whispered quietly, not to anyone else but to herself. Justice isn't about shouting louder. It's about standing firmer. Outside, the rain kept falling, but on the top floor of Sky Vista Airlines, another kind of storm had begun, not one of nature, but of change. And at the center of that storm, Lauren Carter stood still, calm, resolute, and utterly awake, a living declaration: I will not destroy a system because it hated me. I will own it and make it better. Winter in Detroit, 1990. The streets in the southern part of the city were covered in snow and gray smoke, the metallic scent of the steel mills blending with the distant blare of truck horns. In a small house at the end of Jefferson Street, 12-year-old Lauren Carter sat by the window, carefully writing words onto a sheet of paper taped to the wall. Harvard Business School. Financial freedom. Build my own empire. There were no posters of pop singers, no pictures of basketball stars, only scraps of paper written in marker crookedly taped to the rough wall. Her mother, Denise Carter, smiled as she watched her daughter draw a small star next to the word Harvard. "Do you even know where Harvard is, Lauren?" she asked. "Somewhere far away, but I'm going there." The little girl answered, her eyes glowing like tiny sparks in the grey winter light. At that age, Lauren already understood that dreams weren't made for the faint of heart. Her father, Franklin Carter, was a machine repairman at an auto plant, working day and night shifts back to back. His hands were always stained with oil, his shirts forever carrying the smell of rust. Every evening he came home too tired to take off his shoes, but he still asked the same question without fail. "What did you learn today?" Lauren would tell him everything from how to multiply fractions to the essay she wrote, titled Justice in Society. He would nod, his eyes filled with the kind of faith the outside world had never given them. In her teenage years, Lauren attended public school in East Detroit, where most students dropped out before 17. Her class began with more than 30 students. By the end of the year, only 18 remained. Her math teacher once told her, "No one around here dreams about Harvard, Lauren. You should be more realistic." She didn't argue. She simply smiled and wrote the sentence down in her notebook, not to feel sad, but to remember. Her secret was simple: never let anyone else define the size of her dreams. Every morning she woke up at 4, helped her mother wash dishes and clean the house before heading to school. Every night, while neighbors watched television, she studied business English from an old cassette tape. She once told her best friend, "If you want to change the world, you have to speak the language the world listens to." At 16, she earned a partial scholarship to attend an economics summer program in Chicago. It was her first time leaving the neighborhood she grew up in. She saw glowing skyscrapers and women in tailored suits stepping out of luxury cars, and she made herself a promise: One day she would walk with that same confident gaze. 2 years later, the letter from Harvard finally arrived. A white envelope with a red logo. Her father's hands trembled as he opened it. Her mother cried without words. On that single sheet of paper was one sentence. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted into the Bachelor of Economics program at Harvard University." The family held each other in their small kitchen, tears mixing with joy. Her father stepped outside, lit his first cigarette in 10 years, and watched the smoke curl upward like an old dream reignited. "My daughter," he whispered, "she's leaving this place, and she'll never come back as a loser." Harvard was another world entirely. Perfect green lawns, libraries that glowed through the night, and students who spoke in a language blended with confidence and privilege. Lauren, the girl from Detroit, arrived with a few simple outfits and an unbreakable belief, stepping into that world like someone from another planet. On the first day when she introduced herself in business management class, a blonde student smirked and asked Detroit, "Do they even have high schools there?" The class laughed. Lauren smiled and replied, "Yes, and we learn enough to get here." She never let ridicule pull her down. Instead, it fueled her. She studied relentlessly, worked part-time at the library, and sent money home to help her parents. She graduated at the top of her class with honors. When she stepped onto the stage to receive her diploma, applause thundered through the hall, but Lauren's eyes lifted to the high ceiling, thinking of her parents back in Detroit, the ones who had taught her that true pride wasn't in titles, but in how you hold your dignity when you're underestimated. After graduation, Lauren received offers from major corporations, from Morgan Hall Bank to Whitestone Energy Group. But when her mother asked, "Which one will you choose?" Lauren answered without hesitation, "None of them. I'm going to build my own." Her mother worried. "You're young, that's risky." Lauren smiled, her gaze steady. "I'm not afraid of risk. I'm afraid of having to ask permission to sit at the table." 3 years later, at 26, Lauren Carter founded Horizon Innovations, a strategic consulting firm specializing in saving companies on the brink of collapse. No one believed that a young black woman could succeed in a world ruled by white men in expensive suits. But Lauren didn't need them to believe. She only needed one chance to prove it. And when her first project succeeded, rescuing a manufacturing company from bankruptcy and helping them quadruple profits in a year, the Business Chronicle called her the quiet storm of the financial world. Lauren only smiled. She wasn't a quiet storm. She was the hidden hurricane sweeping away the limits that society had drawn. That night in her small Dallas office, she sat alone, staring at the city skyline. The distant lights reflected against the glass, forming thousands of tiny stars. Lauren whispered softly, as if to herself, "Tomorrow I won't just sit at the table. I'll own the room." She had no idea that this dream, born in a small Detroit home, would soon lead her to a moment where the sky and the ground would trade places, a moment when a single first-class seat would test everything she had ever believed about dignity, justice, and power. It was a cool Dallas morning, the sky so clear it felt like you could see every layer of drifting cloud. Lauren Carter stepped out of her quiet penthouse, a small silver-gray suitcase in hand. Inside were only 3 tailored suits, her laptop, and a thick folder for the presentation in New York, a $500 million deal that could redefine the future of Horizon Innovations. Her assistant, Megan Price, was already waiting in the lobby beside a sleek black sedan. "We still have time to switch to the private jet, Lauren," she said softly. already knowing what the answer would be. Lauren smiled, placing her suitcase into the trunk. No need. I want to experience Sky Vista like a real customer. If I'm going to own a company, I need to understand it from the inside. And if someone recognizes you as a major shareholder, Megan asked. Lauren shook her head lightly. No one sees power when they don't believe you have it. The car moved through the early dawn. The city was still half asleep, wrapped in mist. The road so empty, you could hear the hum of the engine echo. Lauren gazed out the window, the first light of day, reflecting on her calm face. Her eyes steady and focused like forged steel. At Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, the crowd moved under pale white lights. Lauren wore a cream-colored suit, her hair neatly tied back, carrying only a small handbag. Every detail of her appearance radiated quiet confidence, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and why you're there. As she approached the priority lane for first-class passengers, a middle-aged white security officer glanced at her ticket, then at her disbelief flickering in his eyes. "First class," he repeated slowly, as if confirming something impossible. "Yes," Lauren replied evenly, her tone calm but clear, her gaze unwavering. He turned the ticket under the light, inspecting the ink, then asked, half mocking, half skeptical. Business trip. Lauren's smile was cool and sharp as glass. "No, I'm going to work." The man frowned, but eventually gestured for her to pass. She had only taken a few steps when the crackle of a radio sounded behind her. "Keep an eye on the priority lane. Possible suspicious passenger female flight 317 to New York. Might be an issue with an upgraded ticket." Lauren didn't turn around. She'd grown used to this kind of quiet suspicion. Each time she remembered. Not for revenge, but to understand how prejudice operated in silence. At the security checkpoint, even with her pre-check clearance, she was pulled aside for a full-body search. "Arms out, please," the female agent said smoothly. Her tone practiced, her eyes cold. As the woman's hands brushed across her shoulders, her waist, her jacket pockets. Lauren glanced sideways at the next line, 3 white businessmen in suits walking through effortlessly without a single question. Afterward, she packed her laptop, slipped on her heels and lifted her chin. There was nothing shameful about being underestimated. The only shame was staying silent forever. On her way to the gate, she paused when she overheard 2 Sky Vista staff near the cargo area. Another one thinking reward points can get her into first class. "Yeah, look at that outfit. Bet the ticket's fake. She really thinks people will buy it." Their laughter was low and sharp, like knives cutting through cloth. Lauren didn't stop, only tightened her grip on her handbag. She had heard words like these hundreds of times in hundreds of places. But this time, they would be remembered. The first-class lounge was quiet, filled only with the sound of keyboards and the smell of dark coffee. Lauren chose a seat by the window, opened her laptop and reviewed the presentation one last time. Everything had to be perfect, not just because of the enormous investment, but because this was a defining step for Horizon Proof that a Black-owned firm could lead the future of sustainable energy. The announcement came over the speakers, now boarding first-class passengers. Lauren stood holding her ticket and approached the gate. The first attendant, Andre Lewis, a black man in his 30s, greeted her warmly. "Good morning, Miss Carter. Headed to New York today." Lauren smiled softly. "Yes, and hopefully a smooth flight." "Of course. Wishing you a pleasant journey, a brief, gentle warmth in a long, cold morning." But as she stepped forward, another voice rang out behind the counter. "Excuse me, I need to recheck your ticket." It was Bethany, the second attendant, her tone loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Lauren stopped and handed over the ticket. The woman examined it under the light, turning it over repeatedly, while the white passengers behind her were scanned through in seconds. "And I'll need to see your ID." Lauren handed over her driver's license, her smile still there, though her hand had tightened slightly. She could feel the eyes around her, curious, doubtful, some even entertained. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "No, just need to verify." Bethany returned the documents, then whispered to her colleague, "Better to be safe. Could be another unusual upgrade." Lauren walked on, hearing the faint murmur of double check behind her. She drew a long, steady breath. Stay calm. Remember. Observe. On the plane, the first-class cabin glowed softly, the beige leather seats smooth and inviting. Lauren sat in seat 2A, placing her laptop on the small table. Flight attendant Kyle Rogers approached, smiling with professional precision. He served the man on her right. "Good morning, sir." Orange juice, champagne, or water, then turned to the elderly couple in the first row, the same polite smile. When he reached Lauren's seat, he walked right past her, as if she were invisible. Lauren lifted her hand slightly. "Excuse me, may I have a glass of water?" Kyle stopped his face, tightening. "Beverage service begins after takeoff, ma'am. But I just saw you serving other passengers." His eyes darkened. Policy changed. He turned and walked away. Lauren watched him go, her heart beat steady, though a heavy weariness spread through her chest. Discrimination rarely shouted. It whispered through small gestures and deliberate silences. From the front row, Andre Lewis caught the exchange, his brows knitting. He knew exactly who Kyle was, and he also knew what would happen if he spoke up. A black crew member challenging discrimination was always labeled disruptive. All he could do was meet Lauren's eyes with a small, apologetic glance, a silent message of solidarity. Lauren responded with a faint smile that said, "I understand. I can handle it." She didn't yet know that within minutes, this flight would become the turning point of her entire life, a moment when true power would be tested and justice would finally take flight. The commotion from the front of the cabin made Lauren look up from her laptop. She had just finished reviewing the final slide of her presentation when she saw a heavy-set man with graying hair in a shiny grey suit arguing furiously with a flight attendant by the boarding door. "Do you have any idea who I am? I've flown this route for 15 years. His voice boomed across the cabin like thunder. Passengers began glancing at one another. Lauren recognized him immediately. Gregory Barnes, CEO of Barnes Capital, one of the most influential investors in Texas. She knew his name from conferences and knew his reputation. Too wealthy, arrogant, accustomed to being catered to. Flight attendant Andre Lewis stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "Sir, please lower your voice. We'll work to resolve the issue." Gregory waved him off, pointing straight toward the first-class cabin. "Where's my seat?" The agent said there was a mix-up. "What about that empty one there?" Lauren frowned slightly. The seat he was pointing to was hers. "Mr. Barnes," Andre replied carefully, "that seat already belongs to a confirmed passenger." "Then where is this passenger? Let me see them." Gregory looked around until his gaze landed on Lauren. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then a faint smirk curved his lips. She doesn't look like she belongs in first class." A few passengers chuckled softly. Lauren felt the weight of their stares, curious, judgmental, some even amused. She drew in a steady breath, closed her laptop, and looked up, her expression calm. Andre started to respond, but Kyle Rogers stepped in first. His tone was sugary, his smile aimed squarely at Gregory. "Mr. Barnes, please stay calm. I'll speak with the lead attendant and see if we can make some adjustments." Just one sentence, and Lauren understood exactly what they intended to do: remove her from her seat. Moments later, Cheryl Adams, the lead flight attendant, arrived. Her uniform was crisp, her smile polished but hollow. "Good afternoon, Miss Carter," she said sweetly, her tone so smooth it sounded mocking. "We have a special situation. Mr. Barnes is a long-time Diamond member, so we'd like to ask for your cooperation in changing seats perhaps to business class or economy plus." Lauren met her gaze, her voice steady, each word landing with quiet precision. "No. I purchased this seat on time with my ticket. I have no reason to move." Cheryl's brows arched slightly. "You understand this is a unique circumstance, right? This isn't a demand. It's a request for cooperation." "And I," Lauren replied, "am legally declining." The tension in the air tightened. Behind Cheryl, Kyle folded his arms, a smug grin tugging at his mouth. Gregory shook his head, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Honestly, is it worth the fuss? It's just a seat. Some people really don't know their place." The eyes around Lauren felt like sharp blades pressing in. Still, she didn't look away. She picked up her phone, switched on the recorder, and placed it on the tray table. "Let me clarify," she said clearly. "You're asking me to give up the first-class seat I purchased to make room for someone who boarded late, is that correct?" Cheryl's face shifted. Her hand trembled slightly. "You're misunderstanding me," Lauren interrupted. "No. I understand perfectly. I'm asking for an honest answer." Kyle's tone hardened. "You're disrupting the flight. If you don't move, we'll have to call security." A heavy silence filled the air. Then Lauren stood up slowly. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply said, quiet but unwavering, "Fine, but remember this isn't over." She picked up her suitcase and stepped into the aisle as Gregory sank smugly into her seat with a satisfied sigh. Finally settled. Some people need to relearn manners. Andre stood nearby, his eyes filled with frustration. He wanted to say something, but his hand clenched around the serving tray. One wrong word, and he could lose his job. Lauren walked down the first-class aisle, like walking through a corridor of judgment. Passengers pretended to read their newspapers, some sneaking glances, their faces caught between pity and complicity. No one spoke, and that silence stung more than any insult could. Cheryl followed close behind, her voice smooth but sharp as steel. "Please take seat 27. It's the only one left." Lauren turned slightly, offering a thin, cutting smile. "Don't worry. I won't need any special treatment." The economy cabin was cramped, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of cheap coffee and plastic. Kyle pointed. "Here, row 27B." Lauren looked up. It was a middle seat, wedged between a large man and a young woman with headphones. "Excuse me," she said softly, squeezing in. The man barely moved, exhaling loudly, as he pulled his thick arm off the armrest, leaving her just enough room for their shoulders to nearly touch. She set her suitcase under the seat and took a deep breath. The heat rising in her throat wasn't from embarrassment. It was from the effort of swallowing anger. "You must have done something bad to get kicked down here," the man beside her muttered. Lauren turned to him, her voice calm, her smile faint. "No, I just exist." The girl in the next seat looked up, puzzled. "What do you mean by that?" Lauren faced forward. "Nothing at all." Andre passed by, quietly adjusting luggage in the overhead bins, then stopped beside her. "Miss Carter, are you all right?" he asked gently. I'm fine. Thank you, she replied. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. This happens more often than you think. I've reported it before, but the files disappeared. They told me not to make things complicated. Lauren nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. I'll remember this. Her words weren't just gratitude, they were a verdict quietly recorded. As the plane lifted into the sky, Lauren stared out the small window, where the blue horizon shimmered with silver light. At 10,000 meters above ground, she thought no distance could feel greater until she realized the gap between dignity and privilege was higher than any cloud. Around her, the engines hummed steadily, the man beside her sniffled, the attendants served drinks. Lauren looked down at her phone, the recording still running, the seconds ticking like marks etched into memory. She whispered just loud enough for herself to hear. They didn't just take my seat. They opened the path for me to take the whole airline. From the back of the cabin, Andre glanced over his shoulder. He didn't know who she really was. But in that instant, he saw something rare in her eyes, the composure of someone who already knew she would win. Just not yet. Outside the window, dawn broke through the clouds, a streak of cold, brilliant light cutting across the sky and landing on Lauren Carter's face. The woman who had just been humiliated mid-air yet was about to make the entire sky bow to her. The plane cut through the clouds, leaving behind a long streak of light like a line dividing two worlds, the one where power had been stripped away and the one where it was about to be reclaimed. Lauren Carter sat motionless in seat 27B, her back-straight eyes fixed on the small oval window. The man beside her occupied nearly all the space, his shoulder pressing against hers, making even breathing a conscious effort. The woman in seat 27C lowered her headphones, glanced over and said softly, "Honestly, I thought people only got moved when there was a problem." Lauren turned toward her, her voice calm but firm. "There is a problem. But it's not me." The woman fell silent, her eyes flickering with embarrassment. Lauren opened her phone, checking the recording app. The timeline was still running every minute, capturing every sound, every word, every trace of silence and complicity. A while later, Andre Lewis passed by. He carried a serving tray, trying to appear composed, though guilt lingered in his eyes. "Miss Carter, would you like some water?" he asked quietly. Lauren nodded, a faint smile forming. "Thank you, Andre. And don't worry, I'm fine." Andre bowed his head slightly, his voice barely above a whisper. "What happened earlier, it's not the first time. I've seen it for years. Every report gets deleted. All they care about is keeping the VIPs happy." "Have you ever thought about leaving?" she asked. "I need this job," he said, eyes glancing toward the rows ahead. "But I'm tired of always bowing my head." Lauren studied him for a long moment. In that instant, she saw a reflection of her younger self, the girl who once had to prove her worth in a room full of people who didn't believe she belonged. "Your time will come, Andre," she said softly. "One day, you won't have to bow anymore." 3 hours later, the plane began its descent. White light poured through the window, illuminating Lauren's face, her eyes glowing like flames reignited. As the wheels touched down on the runway in New York, she closed her eyes and thought, "For now they've won a seat, but I will win the entire system." The cabin filled with the sound of seatbelts clicking open and passengers rushing for their luggage. Lauren stayed seated, waiting for the crowd to thin. When she finally stood, those behind her stepped aside, as if their shame had taken physical form. In first class, Gregory Barnes was laughing with Kyle and Cheryl, a glass of champagne glimmering in his hand. As Lauren passed, she caught Cheryl's saccharine voice saying, "Barnes, we're so sorry for that minor inconvenience earlier." "That's all right," Gregory replied smoothly, "as long as you know who your important passengers are." Lauren paused for half a second. She didn't say a word, only let a faint smile cross her lips, the kind of smile that comes from knowing exactly how the story will end. As she stepped off the plane, Andre nodded slightly. "I hope your next flight will be better," he said quietly. Lauren replied, "It won't need hope. Next time will be different. I promise." That afternoon, inside the Fairmont Hotel in Manhattan, Lauren stood before the mirror, adjusting the button on her blazer, before stepping into the conference room. The fatigue of the flight still shadowed her eyes, but the determination in them burned brighter than ever. In front of her sat the investment team from Harbor Peak Ventures, led by Daniel Cho, a Korean-American businessman known for his precision and pragmatism. He shook Lauren's hand, a restrained smile tugging at his lips. "I've heard your name, Ms. Carter. I hope today you'll show me something worth $500 million. Lauren smiled. "Not just something worth your investment, Mr. Cho, but something that will make you wonder why you didn't do it sooner." The presentation began. Lauren's voice was steady and commanding. Each slide, each number, each chart built toward one undeniable truth. Innovation and ethics were not opposites. They were partners. "We've developed a circular energy system that reduces power consumption by 62% and increases production efficiency by 40%. She explained, her gaze sweeping across the investors. "But more important than that, we're not just saving companies, we're saving communities." She paused, then said clearly, "Fairness doesn't cut into profit. It multiplies it." When the presentation ended, silence filled the room. Only the soft tap of a pen broke it. Then Daniel Cho leaned back in his chair, the first genuine smile spreading across his face. "I've heard thousands of pitches," he said, "but this is the first time I've heard a CEO talk about profit with the voice of someone speaking about justice." He paused for a beat. "You're asking for 500 million. I'm in. And if you ever need 800, I'll consider that too." Lauren nodded calmly, though her heart pounded like a drum. In her eyes there was no trace of the woman who had been humiliated that morning, only the one who had just conquered an entire room with intellect and dignity. As the others left, Daniel approached her quietly. "One more thing, Ms. Carter," he said. "I happened to be on that flight this morning." Lauren froze slightly, her eyes flickering with alertness. "I was in business class," he continued, "and I saw everything." For a moment there was silence. What I witnessed was shameful for Sky Vista. "I'm on their board. I'll make sure it's dealt with." Lauren met his gaze, a faint smile touching her lips. "Thank you, Daniel. But you don't have to handle it. You're not going to let it go, are you, no?" she said slowly, her eyes burning with quiet fire. "I'm going to rebuild the entire system." When she stepped out of the building, night had fallen. The streets of New York glowed with light cars streaming by like the city's lifeblood. Lauren inhaled deeply. In her pocket, her phone vibrated. It was a call from Dallas. The voice of her attorney, Robert Ellis, came through steady and sure. "Lauren, we've gathered enough evidence on Sky Vista. Once you give the word, we move." Lauren looked at the endless flow of headlights ahead, her tone calm but resolute. "Get ready. I'm flying back to Dallas tomorrow, and this time I won't need a first-class ticket." She hung up and crossed the rain-slicked street. In the reflection of golden streetlights, Lauren Carter was no longer the woman forced from her seat. She was the one walking toward a battlefield where every seat of power was about to be rearranged, and as the cold wind swept through the city, carrying the faint echo of a car horn into the night, she whispered a vow, meant only for herself. Tomorrow I'll make their sky belong to justice. Lauren Carter's private jet landed at Dallas Airport close to midnight. The city still shimmered under skyscraper lights, but to her, it was no longer a place of rest. It was a battlefield. A black car waited on the runway, gliding silently through the dark. Inside, Lauren opened her laptop, rows of data and internal reports flashing across the screen like trails of light. Every number was a wound in the system she had once trusted. When the car stopped in front of the tall glass tower that housed the headquarters of Horizon Innovations, 3 people were already waiting in the top-floor conference room: Robert Ellis, the seasoned attorney who had stood by her since her earliest days; Jason Miller, the data engineer and chief technology officer; and Megan Price, her exhausted yet steadfast assistant, whose eyes still burned bright. Lauren entered the room without greeting, speaking only one sentence. "Lock the door. Tonight we expose everything." The large screen flickered to life as Jason's fingers raced across the keyboard, revealing hundreds of internal SkyVista Airlines files, from HR reports and internal emails to the long list of complaints that had been erased. Robert stood nearby, arms folded, his tone low and deliberate. "From what I've read, they've violated dozens of federal anti-discrimination laws in both labor and customer service." Lauren leaned forward. "Details." Jason typed a few commands, streams of figures appearing rapidly. "In the past 3 years, there have been over 217 racial discrimination complaints from passengers. Only 6 were processed, and none led to policy changes." As for internal employees, he stopped looking at Lauren. Every person of color who filed a report was marked as uncooperative and later dismissed. Megan drew in a sharp breath, her voice trembling. "And all those people silenced by non-disclosure agreements," Robert nodded. "Roughly 43 settlements totaling nearly $12 million, large enough to indicate a problem, small enough to escape shareholder notice." Lauren leaned back in her chair. Her face was calm, but her hand tightened until her knuckles turned white. "What about the people from my flight?" Jason switched the screen. "Cheryl Adams, the lead flight attendant. Kyle Rogers, the junior attendant. Gregory Barnes, the VIP passenger. They're all connected," he said. "Kyle is the nephew of Richard Rogers, a board member and head of the HR committee. Cheryl's been the subject of multiple discrimination complaints, but was protected by Rogers. Gregory Barnes is a strategic client worth $8 million in annual contracts." Megan gritted her teeth. "So they think they can do whatever they want." Lauren replied quietly, her voice cold and sharp as tempered steel. "Because they never imagined the person they humiliated was the one who owned their shares." At that moment, the door opened. A tall woman entered her gaze, sharp and analytical. Karen Holt, the internal investigator Robert had called in. "I've reviewed what you've gathered," she said, setting her bag on the table. "But I need to confirm one thing, Lauren. Are you here to expose them or to rebuild everything?" Lauren looked straight at her, no hesitation. "I'm here to make the system collapse and rebuild it with justice." Karen nodded and opened her laptop. "Then listen to this." She projected a string of encrypted emails onto the screen. One stood out, a message between CEO Harold Grant and SkyVista's legal department. It read, "Handle this as usual. Maintain silence, mandatory NDAs. Don't set a precedent for people who think they're special." Megan froze. They called their customers people who think they're special. just because they were black. Robert shook his head. Not just customers. They treated employees the same way. Karen continued. I also found hidden reports. Andre Lewis filed 3 separate complaints against Cheryl Adams for discrimination, each marked as resolved. There's no record of any investigation. Lauren was silent for a long time. Then her voice came low, distant, like thunder rolling over the horizon. And Harold Grant, he knew all of this. Robert nodded. He didn't just know. He ordered a media containment strategy. There's even an audio transcript of him saying, losing a few black customers won't break the company, but a scandal might. Megan slammed her pen on the table, her eyes blazing. God, they even call that a policy. Lauren rose and walked to the large window. Outside, Dallas slept under golden light. The city reflected against the glass like an upside-down world skyscrapers piercing into the dark sky. We're not waiting for the quarterly board meeting, she said, her tone low but firm. I want an emergency session. As soon as the market opens tomorrow morning, increase my shares to 58%. I want full control. Robert hesitated. Lauren, are you sure you want to move this fast? She turned, her eyes cold, but alight with purpose. This isn't revenge. It's emergency surgery on a dying organism. And I'm not removing a few bad cells, I'm replacing the heart. The room fell silent, filled only with the soft clicks of keyboards and the wind brushing against the glass. Dawn crept in. A faint pink hue spread across the horizon. The team was exhausted, but no one left their seats. On the final screen appeared a list of employees, wrongfully disciplined people, whose names Sky Vista had tried to erase. Lauren stared at the names, scrolling one by one, an entire line of the forgotten. Her voice softened. Tomorrow they'll hear their names again. And this time, in honor. Megan placed a hand on her shoulder. Are you sure, Lauren? They'll fight you, the board, the press, everyone. Lauren smiled faintly. I know. But what they don't understand is this. When a black woman has lived her whole life being doubted and diminished, there's nothing left that can scare her. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. The line rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. Mr. Louis Andre's voice came through rough with fatigue. Yes, this is he. This is Lauren Carter, she said. Silence filled the line for a beat, then a sharp intake of breath. You're the owner of Sky Vista Airlines, she finished gently. I need you in a meeting this morning. There's something I want you to witness. And this time you won't need your uniform. When she hung up, the first rays of sunlight streamed into the conference room, illuminating Lauren Carter's face. The night had ended, but the fight for justice had just begun. The Dallas morning was hazy, the sun veiled behind a thin layer of smoke, its faint light streaming through the window of a small cafe on the corner of Main Street. Lauren Carter sat in the quietest corner, a spot that allowed her a clear view of the entrance. She hadn't chosen the place for its coffee, but for its privacy, quiet enough for a conversation that could alter the fate of an entire corporation. On the table before her sat 2 cups of steaming black coffee. One remained untouched. Lauren glanced at her watch. 10 o'clock. She knew the man she was waiting for was punctual, the same man who had once bowed slightly and smiled at her with quiet sincerity on the airplane, while everyone else had only mocked. The door opened, and the small bell chimed. Andre Lewis stepped in, wearing his deep blue flight attendant uniform. His tie neatly knotted his demeanor, polite yet tense. His eyes swept across the cafe until they met hers. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, a mix of recognition, uncertainty, and respect. "Ms. Carter," he said cautiously as he approached. "I didn't think you'd really want to see me." "Sit down, Andre." Lauren gestured toward the chair opposite her. "And call me Lauren. I think we can skip the formalities today." He sat, clasping his hands together. The waitress placed a cup before him and quietly walked away. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Lauren studied him, her eyes calm but penetrating, as if she were looking past words and straight into truth. First, she began, "I want to thank you for how you treated me that day." Andre gave a faint, wistful smile. "I only did what was right." "Exactly," Lauren replied. "And that's why I need your help to do something bigger, to do what's right for the entire system." He tilted his head slightly, surprise flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Lauren reached into her bag and placed an envelope on the table. "Inside this is documentation proving that I own 58% of Sky Vista Airlines. I am the actual owner of the company." Andre blinked, confused. "You're joking, right?" "No," she said, sliding the envelope toward him. "I'm not. I've kept my identity hidden because I wanted to see how the company operated when power wasn't watching. And Andre, I've seen enough." He opened the envelope, scanning the official papers bearing the Sky Vista logo, the legal certificates, and her signature on every line. His hands trembled slightly. "You own the airline, but they threw me out of my first-class seat," she finished, "because they believed respect was a privilege, not a right." Andre sat still, his gaze distant. "What do you want me to do?" Lauren leaned back, her tone steady and deliberate. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting this Friday. I'll replace the entire leadership team, remove those who uphold the culture of discrimination, and announce a full-scale reform. But I need someone on the inside, someone who knows the system from the ground up, someone unafraid to tell the truth, someone who's lived through it." He gave a soft, bitter laugh. "Do you know how dangerous that is? I could lose my job, my career, everything." Lauren met his eyes. "Andre, you've already lost too much. Your trust, your dignity, your chances to rise. This time, I don't want you to lose any more. I want you to reclaim it." The air between them grew still. Outside, the wind stirred the cafe's hanging sign, and the light shimmered against the coffee cups like small stars. Andre drew a deep breath, his voice steady. "If I say yes, what role are you offering me?" Lauren answered without hesitation. "Senior Director of Customer Experience. You'll oversee all service policies, training programs, and professional ethics. I need you to make sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone again." Andre stayed silent, staring at his coffee, as the steam rose like a thin veil of fog. Years of memories passed through his mind, the promotions he never got, the reports he filed, that disappeared the hollow apologies from his superiors. At last, he looked up, his eyes firm. "I don't need to think about it. I've waited 8 years for this chance." Lauren smiled, extending her hand. "Then welcome to the revolution." Their hands clasped tightly. In that instant, the small cafe felt like the epicenter of a gathering storm, the storm of justice born from one person's faith and another's courage to act. That afternoon, Lauren returned to her penthouse. The room was bright with the soft light of late day. Robert Ellis, Jason Miller, and Megan Price were gathered before a row of glowing screens. "Everything's ready," Jason reported. "Your ownership stake has officially risen to 58%. Sky Vista can no longer dispute your authority." "And the meeting on Friday?" Lauren asked. "Invitations have been sent. They think it's a quarterly review. No one suspects you'll be there." Robert smiled, sliding a thick folder toward her. "Here, evidence data and the termination papers. All that's left is your signature." Lauren took the pen and signed her name with a strong, decisive stroke. "Good. I want Cheryl Adams, Kyle Rogers, and Gregory Barnes present at headquarters for the meeting. I want them to witness their own ending." She paused for a brief moment, her voice low. "And prepare a seat for someone new. His name is Andre Lewis." Megan smiled faintly. The quiet hero from the flight, Lauren, nodded. No one understands respect better than the one who's had it taken away. The room glowed in golden light, the ticking of the clock the only sound. No one spoke, but the air was alive with an electric tension, the calm that comes before a storm. Lauren turned toward the window, the city lights rising against the deepening sky. Her voice rang steady, each word deliberate like a vow. "They thought they threw me out of a seat. But what they don't know is that I'm about to take the highest one of all. And when I do, I won't just change the people. I'll change the definition of power itself." The night wind rose, carrying with it the damp scent of the coming storm. In the reflection on the glass, Lauren Carter stood tall, her eyes burning bright, not as a woman seeking revenge, but as the architect of a new order. Friday afternoon settled over Dallas beneath a strange, deep blue sky, so still it felt as if the entire city was holding its breath. Inside the tallest glass tower downtown, the 42nd floor of Sky Vista Airlines had been lit since early morning. Members of the board gathered for what they believed was a routine, quarterly review, unaware they were moments away from walking into a storm of justice orchestrated by Lauren Carter herself. From the lobby came the steady echo of heels. Lauren entered her posture, straight-wrapped in a fitted navy suit, her eyes glinting with the calm resolve of someone who had already decided. Behind her walked Robert Ellis, Megan Price, Jason Miller, and Karen Holt, each carrying a thick leather case. "Please inform the board that the controlling shareholder has arrived," Lauren said, her tone soft but commanding. The receptionist froze, assuming it was a joke. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see your name on the attendance list." Lauren placed a stamped document before him. "You do now." Within a minute, the intercom phones upstairs rang in rapid succession. In the boardroom, a ripple of unease spread. The door opened. The space inside was washed in bright white light. A long walnut table filled the center, surrounded by 12 men and women in tailored suits. At the head sat Harold Grant, the CEO of Sky Vista, a man who believed himself untouchable. When Lauren stepped in the room, froze. Harold frowned. "Excuse me, who are you? This meeting isn't open to visitors." Lauren set her case on the table, her movement graceful, yet deliberate. "I'm not a visitor. I am the owner of 58% of Sky Vista Airlines." Harold stared speechless, while murmurs spread among the others. He forced a laugh, masking his disbelief. Impossible. Any change in ownership would have been reported to this board. Not when the shares were acquired through 6 separate investment firms, Lauren replied evenly, her eyes locked on his. "And today, I'm here to inform you that Sky Vista has a new owner." Megan opened her laptop, projecting a series of legal documents and Securities Commission confirmations. Every number, every signature, every seal was undeniable. Some board members began whispering a few soft gasps of "Oh my God," echoing around the table. Harold leaned forward, his tone strained but controlled. "Even if what you are saying is true, you can't walk in here and restructure the leadership. You don't have the authority, no authority." Lauren's voice cut through the room, sharp and resonant. None of you had the authority to humiliate passengers because of their skin color. None of you had the authority to bury over 200 discrimination complaints. And none of you had the authority to hide the truth just to protect dirty VIP contracts. Yet you did all of it. Robert Ellis stepped forward, placing a thick folder before each member. Here are the proofs: internal emails, deleted complaint logs, secret settlement details, each signed by Harold Grant. The air grew heavy. Harold let out a strained laugh. "You're fabricating this. These are stolen documents. They're not admissible." Karen Holt rose to her feet, her tone cutting. "No, they were extracted under the legal rights of the controlling shareholder. Every file is authentic." Lauren moved to the head of the table, standing face to face with Harold. 3 days ago, I was on a Sky Vista flight from Dallas to New York. I was forced out of my first-class seat to make room for a white VIP passenger. The woman who made that call was your lead flight attendant, Cheryl Adams. And do you know what's ironic? Harold, she paused, her gaze sharp as a blade. The seat they removed me from was mine. Silence fell like a hammer. Harold stammered. You were that passenger?" "Yes," Lauren answered. "And I didn't come back to complain. I came back to rebuild the company you've disgraced." The boardroom doors opened again. Cheryl Adams, Kyle Rogers, and Gregory Barnes entered, summoned under special notice. They thought they were being commended, but when they saw Lauren, they froze into place. Cheryl stammered, You're that passenger." Lauren smiled faintly. "And you, Mrs. Adams, are the chief attendant of the airline I own." Gregory tried to speak, but Lauren raised her hand, stopping him. "No need to explain. I've heard enough from you on that flight." She looked around the room, her tone calm, but echoing with authority. "I'm not here to create chaos. I'm here to restore order." Therefore, as of this moment, she placed a document on the table, and Robert began to read aloud. "By the authority of the controlling shareholder, Lauren Carter hereby terminates Harold Grant from his position as Chief Executive Officer of Sky Vista Airlines, effective immediately. Additionally, Cheryl Adams and Kyle Rogers are dismissed for severe violations of equality policy. All contracts with Barnes Capital owned by Gregory Barnes are permanently revoked." Harold's face turned crimson as he shot up from his chair, shouting, "You can't do this, I'll sue you." Lauren's reply was calm and cold as steel. "You can try, but before you do, you might want your lawyer to explain the hidden bonus payments I just uncovered in your accounts." The scrape of chairs filled the room, and a few board members gasped. Harold's shoulders sank. The color drained from his face. The storm had stripped him bare. Lauren turned to the rest of the board, her tone softening into the stillness that follows thunder. Sky Vista forgot that fairness isn't a marketing strategy. It's the foundation of trust. If we don't change today, tomorrow, this company will be nothing but an empty shell. She nodded toward the door. It opened again, and Andre Lewis stepped in, not in his flight attendant uniform, but a sleek gray suit. Every eye turned to him. Lauren introduced him. "This is Andre Lewis, a man passed over for promotion 4 times because he dared to speak up. Today he will serve as Senior Director of Customer Experience." Andre stood tall, his voice firm. "I will make sure no one is ever treated the way Ms. Carter or I once were." Applause broke from several board members, those who had just witnessed truth laid bare. Lauren nodded in gratitude, then turned toward the window. Outside, rain had begun to fall, the first drops dissolving against the glass, like faint erasures of the past. She looked back, her voice steady, clear, and final. Today, Sky Vista isn't just changing leadership. Today, we're rewriting history. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside that room, a new era had begun. 6 months later, the headquarters of Sky Vista Airlines was no longer the cold fortress of old power. The glass walls had been replaced with vibrant murals depicting faces of every color, every smile. Where portraits of white CEOs once hung, now stood a wall engraved by hand with the words, "Dignity, respect, excellence for everyone." In the grand lobby, Lauren Carter walked slowly beside Andre Lewis, now dressed in a crisp black suit, his nameplate gleaming, Executive Vice President of Customer Experience. Morning light filtered through the glass ceiling, casting reflections across their faces, two people from two different beginnings standing together at the start of a new chapter. "The press is ready," Andre said, his voice steady, but touched with emotion. "And all the special guests have arrived." Lauren nodded. "Today isn't just a press conference. Today we fulfill a promise. The doors opened to reveal 25 people, those once wronged by Sky Vista employees, passengers, people who had been removed from planes simply because of the color of their skin. As Lauren and Andre entered, everyone stood. There was no applause, only the quiet weight of gratitude in their eyes, a kind of emotion that spoke louder than words. Lauren began to speak, her voice calm and warm. "Justice isn't something that can be bought. It's something we rebuild when it's been broken. Over the past 6 months, we've done exactly that. Starting today, Sky Vista launches the Justice Fund to compensate and honor everyone who was ever harmed. And your names, the names of those who had the courage to speak up, will be engraved here, so they can never be erased again." Andre continued, his tone firm but gentle. "No one will ever lose their job for telling the truth. No one will ever be disrespected for being themselves." The room erupted in a wave of applause that echoed off the glass walls and merged with the golden morning light, the dawn of a new airline where justice had finally reclaimed the sky. 1 year later at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, a large banner hung above the entrance to Sky Vista Airlines' newly opened first-class lounge. The Dignity Lounge, where every passenger is a VIP. Warm, golden light filled the space, illuminating photographs that told the story of the airline's transformation from the scandal that had once shaken it to the smiling faces of new employees in uniforms of many colors. Amid the crowd, Lauren Carter cut the ceremonial ribbon, standing beside Andre Lewis, now the official CEO of Sky Vista Airlines. Behind the row of cameras, Lauren began to speak. Justice is not about punishing those who did wrong. It's about creating an environment where everyone can do what's right. Sky Vista is no longer a symbol of power, but a symbol of dignity. Andre took the microphone, his voice ringing with strength and pride. "We once soared high on profit, but now we will fly far on compassion." Applause filled the hall like thunder. Outside the glass walls, a Sky Vista aircraft bearing its new logo, a silver-winged bird stretching upward through the blue sky, lifted into the air. Lauren watched it ascend, her eyes reflecting a calm, steady faith. Nearby, a young flight attendant whispered to her colleague, "That's her, the owner of the airline." The other replied softly, her voice full of pride. "She's not just the owner. She's the woman who redefined the sky itself." Lauren smiled. She knew her work was far from over, because justice has no landing point, only an endless flight toward the sunrise. From the perspective of an expert in ethical leadership, Lauren Carter's story is not just the journey of a woman who was humiliated and then reclaimed her power. It is proof that true justice does not arise from anger, but from wisdom and perseverance. Lauren did not destroy the system. She did something far more difficult. She repaired it, turning fairness into a standard rather than an exception. She showed that the greatest power does not lie in a title, but in how we use it to lift others up. When a leader transforms pain into reform, she doesn't just change a company, she rewrites the standards of an entire industry. If you believe that respect is not a privilege, but the foundation of human dignity, then like this video to help spread that message. And don't forget to subscribe to join us for more stories where people triumph through integrity, not status. Leave a comment below with a phrase that reflects your belief in human worth. Hold your dignity.